presentations before. But if not, for those of you who are new, hopefully, I've put enough background and context there so that you know what we've been trying to do. And if you have any questions, just let me know. So do you all see my screen right now?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. So as most of you know, we started this project back in 2008, and every couple of years we've provided an update. All the reports are available on the safecaliforniastreets.org website. They're all archived there. You can download them anytime you want if you just kind of want to see the historical trends of where things were when we started and where things are today. And obviously, we have a draft report that was submitted to the Oversight Committee. You've all, I think, had a chance to at least download it, hopefully, at least read the executive summary. There's two reports this year, which is a little bit different. We took the bridge report and we made it a sister report or companion report. It's very technical, has a lot of information, more weeds, I guess, than because it is intended to be a technical report, which the Highway Bridge Committee is reviewing right now as well. So just a quick word, these are the folks who have sponsored this project. CSAC, of course, the League, SEAC, and then the RTPA, this group here, as well as the Rural Counties Task Force. And I wanted to stop and just add a quick note. Thank you for your help, because last year when we opened up the survey back in, I think it was mid-February, and 30 days into it, we had barely gotten maybe 15-20% responses. Everyone got sent home, and it was extremely challenging to get responses after that. But people dug in, and there were very many persistent staff members at cities and counties that did provide us the data. I know you all did your part in kind of reminding them. And so I want to say thank you, because we got a pretty good, robust response rate. So I think the first question that people ask me is, has this project been successful? And I think, if you look back at the last 12 years and all the efforts that we've done, all the meetings, all the presentations we've made to the CTC, to the legislature, to the LAO's office, to the governor's staff, not to mention elected officials in the city councils and board of supervisors, just kind of getting the word out that, yes, we don't have enough money for our roads and our bridges, and here's how much we need. Here are some solutions. And so we've done this for many, many years. And so I would say that maybe the outcome or the one metric for success is SB1. We got SB1. Finally, in April of 2017, the money started flowing, as you all probably remember, around late 2017. And then almost immediately in 2018, we got hit with a repeal. And that kind of halted things a little bit. And I want to touch upon that a little bit as well as part of this project. But then, 2019 onwards, we've all got SB1 now. Then, of course, early 2020, the pandemic hit, and that was another little dip in our revenues. But nonetheless, I think we can all count on SB1 for local streets and roads. The first time ever, the legislature earmarked $15 billion, about $1.5 billion a year to local streets and roads. And that included, of course, all the essential components and the bridges, basically within the local infrastructure. So I would say that, have we been successful? I think the part that has been successful is two things. One, we were able to finally make the local street system visible to the CTC. And we did that by being persistent, by showing up every couple of years, by showing up right next to Caltrans when the shop was being discussed. In the early part of this project, we actually did presentations right next to Caltrans, right after each other, so that the CTC actually had a really good idea of the comparisons between the state system and the local system, and to also, I think, indicate the importance of the local system. Same thing, we did many of these presentations to the various transportation committees at the legislature. So it paid off. We got SB1. So the focus of this project then has always been, well, how bad are things, right? What are the conditions? How much is it going to cost to fix all these things, to improve and repair all these components in the infrastructure that we have. Very importantly, and really it's the last three bullets, is how much money did we need, and how can we communicate this results. And I want to give kudos, both to CSAC and the League and SEAC. They have been, by far, the staff has been exemplary in taking the technical results of the study and putting it, presenting it in a way to the different staff of the legislators so that people got attention, like Senator Beal. So the other part, though, about this particular report is, in addition to all these things that you see on the slide right now, is we really wanted to be able to report to the legislature what the impact of SB1 was. So I want to just stop here for a second and say, in 2018, we did this project in the middle of the repeal. And so the focus of the 2018 report was to show the consequences if SB1 did get repealed, what would happen. This put in 2020, the focus of this one, and that I felt was very important, was to report on the progress that has been made in the last 2 years, to show, again, the legislators that, the money is paying for something, things are getting accomplished. There was a big campaign back in 2018 to get projects out. You all saw that. So the focus then was what has happened in the last 2 years that with the SB1 money. And that's what I'm going to share with you today. So I'm going to pause here for a second and see if anyone has any questions. All right.
No, that was a great strategy in 2018 and now.
Okay. I always like to start this presentation, particularly to non-city and county folks, with this slide, just to get everyone to notice. And I remember the very first time I did this at the CTC, I think one of the commissioners said they had no idea that local roads form the majority of California's road system. And part of it, of course, is that the dollars associated with the state highway system is so big that the CTC spends a lot of time focused on that. But the local road system is actually 85% of our road network. And you've all by now probably heard, my opening line used to be, when you open your front door in the morning and you walk out, whether you bike to work, take the bus, drive to work, you are going to be on a locally owned facility before you get to the state highway, before you get to the train. And that, I think, kind of struck home to many people that, to go to school, to go buy groceries, you need to use the local road network. Well, that's 144,000 miles right there. So once we know that, let's take a look now about how much data did we get on this 144,000 miles. I mentioned earlier, when we open up, for those of you who are new to the study, every 2 years, what we try to do is open up a period of about 2 months. And we have an online survey, and we send 2,500 letters, not to mention email blasts from both the League and CSAC on their listservs to kind of encourage local agencies to log in and enter and upload the information that we're asking for. And we basically ask for information on the roads, on the storm drains, on the ADA requirements, on their bridges, anything within that they were responsible for in the context of transportation. So this year was a very challenging year. I mentioned that, we opened up the survey in mid-February. We were going to close it in mid-April. We did extend that to some early May thereabouts. I forgot the exact date right now. Partly because, March 16th, the Bay Area was the first one, to send everyone home. And then shortly after that, most of the state was affected, except for some safer, I would say, parts of the state. But despite all that, we were able to get 79% of the agencies responding, and that was pretty good. In the early days, when we first started, we thought that if we would hit 70% response rate, that would be pretty healthy. Last year, we actually hit 90%. So that was a all-time high. We didn't quite hit, not last year, in 2018, and that was an all-time high. So we didn't quite get that. But nonetheless, if you look at the green part of the pie chart right here, that's 92% of the streets and roads that are covered within this 426 responses. So very, very good response overall. On the agencies that did not respond in 2020, that's the blue part of the pie, we used the data that they gave us in previous years. And what we did was we extrapolated what they had as a benchmark, as a baseline to 2020. And then there's a very, very, very tiny, hardly sliver of 5 agencies basically that have never responded. One of them actually has no publicly owned streets, and that's Rolling Hills in Los Angeles County. But they're small agencies, all less than 50 miles, didn't really in the context, didn't have a big impact, obviously, on our results. So I'm going to start this discussion on 3 main things. First on the pavements, then on the essential components, then on the bridges, and then we'll aggregate them at the end and kind of share with you what our results were. So let's talk about pavements first. All of you are aware, we use this scale of 0 to 100. We call it the pavement condition index, with 100 being excellent and 0 being failed. And you can see here, this is a slide that I have used with the CTC just to give them an idea of what these road conditions mean. And if you look at the numbers on the right-hand side, back in 2008, the average PCI for the entire state, we aggregated everyone, was 68. And it really dropped a little bit at a time over the last 12 years to 65 in 2018. So where are we today in 2020? Well, I'm happy to report that in 2020, our average PCI went up 1 point to 66. The average for the cities is 68 and the average for the counties is 61. So we can, I think, say that SB1 in the money that we got in 2018 and 2019 did result in an improvement in the condition, about 1 point. I will say, I think this 1 point is probably conservative. And what I mean by that is that when in spring of 2020, when people are reporting the results, many times they're reporting results that they collected in 2019, maybe before the impacts of the 2019 construction season are completely in. So it lags a little bit. It could be maybe 66.5. I don't know, but I do think it's lagging a little bit, and it will always lag a little bit in these kind of studies. So I'm going to pause here for a second and see if anyone has any questions. Okay. Well, an average is great. I think it's a nice metric. People, I think by and large in California have gotten used to understanding what the PCI is and using the PCI as a way of communication. And what it looks like is, here's a road. You can see that it's not bad. It has some cracks. There's some alligator cracking beginning in the wheel path. There's a longitudinal joint that's not great in there, but it's serviceable. It's rideable. There are definitely some issues that we need to pay attention to as a pavement engineer, but overall looks pretty good. But average PCIs don't tell the whole story. And the reason is I wanted to kind of now tease that average out into some of the ramifications and things. This is a map of California of all the counties. And what we did is every couple of years, we've taken the average PCI within that county and tried to plot it on a map like this. And in 2018, the average PCI was 65, right? And you can, again, the green counties are the ones with a PCI of 70 and above. The red counties have 40 and below, and then the blue counties are in between. So you can think of it as a good, fair, poor sort of a measure. And in 2020, I said that the PCI increased 1 point. But if you look at what the county-wide map is, you don't see too many changes. In fact, if anything, the number of green counties went down to just 3. You've got San Bernardino, Orange County, and San Francisco. Those are now below, above 71. Everyone else is below that. So individually, though, within the maybe cities within the state that have improved, but when we look at the county-wide averages, it doesn't show a big change in that needle. So this kind of tells you a little bit that the PCI and average PCI is a little bit insensitive to some of the changes that you see. And it's an imperfect metric. It's an easy metric for the public and for policymakers to kind of grab onto, but it's by no means the best metric. So we look at other metrics as well. For comparison, I wanted to share with you what things looked like back in 2008. And you can see we've really had a huge shift really in the last 12 years. Back in 2008, as bad as things were, you can see that 1/3 of the counties was in the green category, which was in the good. There was a small handful of red counties, and the predominant, about a little bit less than 2/3 was in blue. And now in 2020, you can see that the number of red counties has grown, partly because there's been more data. So the data in 2008 was definitely the first time we did it, so it wasn't as great as we would like. And over the last 12 years, things have really improved. I think the data that we have now is much more accurate. So definitely, some work to be done. I also wanted to share with you some of the county maps. So these maps are in the appendix of our report. They will also be available on the website, but you can see, Los Angeles County, there's lots of little green areas. A lot of cities in there have green or good roads. Now the agencies are the ones where they did not respond in 2020, but we had data again from previous surveys, so we were able to extrapolate from that. But even though there are green agencies, the overwhelming number of roads is within the Los Angeles County and the city of Los Angeles. And you can see they're kind of light blue. That means that they're in the 60s. So they're at risk, lower risk. The dark blues are the high risk communities. So what happens then is when we average it, it's a weighted average. So the preponderance of the data from LA County and city of LA pretty much overwhelms everything else. And you end up with, LA County being a blue county, if you will. Here's another one for Sacramento County. For those of you who are in the Central Valley, you can see, the county is solidly red. It's in the 40s. And that has an impact, even though there are cities within the county that are in the green or light blue category, that red kind of drags down the average PCI. And I wanted to share with you just a couple more. This is the Bay Area, San Francisco. The green is a little green island out in the middle of the blue. And then here's one just for you, Dave. I wanted to throw in Stanislaus County. It's the county again is in the blue territory, and there's a couple of 2 or 3 green cities within the county. So let me pause again and see if you guys have any questions. Okay. So part of the discussion on pavements has to be on complete streets. And complete streets in the context of what we're trying to do here is really trying to account for the needs of pedestrians and bicyclists, not just vehicles. And we've asked many questions on the survey now on complete streets for many years. And the one thing, the league has always asked me, I remember Jennifer Whiting at the league asking me, Margot, I'm going to go to the legislature. I need to tell them what the cost is for a complete street project. And we have struggled with this for many, many years. And the reason for that is complete streets cover such a broad range of projects. Here's 2 examples, one from Santa Ana and San Clemente. Santa Ana, you can think of it as a medium-sized city. So they did a complete street project with adding new bike lanes, landscaping, adding street lights, widening the sidewalks, and their incremental cost was $18 a square yard. Now, this is, of course, on top of the paving project that they did. San Clemente, a smaller city, also in Southern California, did street widening and class 2 bike lanes. Well, street widening is pretty expensive. So their incremental cost is $135 a square yard. So that's a big range right there. So, and what is the average? I can tell you that we had the data that we got had data in the 2 digits going all the way up to the high was $5,000 a square yard, 5,000. To give you some context, when we rebuilt a road from scratch, from dirt, it's usually around $100 a square yard. So what San Clemente is telling us is that when they started this or did this complete street project, they doubled essentially the construction costs because they had paving. They doubled the cost of a new road. But you can again see, the picture down there shows that they added this new bike lane and that's additional right of way. But that's a complete street project. Another one, two more small cities. These are Emeryville and Mill Valley. These are both in Northern California. And for Emeryville, you can see again, now this time they also had some street widening. They added some bike and bus movements. They added an in-lane transit island. Incremental cost, $50 a square yard. For Mill Valley, another small city, they replaced the medians, put in bike lanes, widened the sidewalks, added curb ramps, and oh my gosh, it's $700 a square yard. I don't quite know what it was all involved because we don't have all the details, but I think my point here is that we took all the data they gave us and we average it, and it's $117 a square yard. Is that a good number? I don't know. Probably not, because it depends so much on what kind of elements are included. So I think what my only note here to all of you is that if you did want to try and make an estimate of what a complete street project is, use this number with caution. It's not perfect. It covers a big range. And it really depends very much on what kind of elements you include in there. But you get a sense for that there is a wide, again, range of costs associated with complete street projects. So let me pause for a second, see if anyone has any questions.
Are there any observations in rural versus urban? Because you would think the cost would be associated with location.
Definitely. Most of the responses came from cities, so mostly in an urban environment. They also, one of the questions we did ask was, not every street is eligible for a complete street project. And I think about, I want to say 35, 40% was the number that most agencies said that, in other words, 30 to 40% of the network was eligible for complete streets. So it's not every single street by any means.
This is Dave Lehman, Stanislaus County. One of the things that our bike clubs would say, and we probably have about 1,000 miles of rural roads, would be if we could just get 4-foot shoulders on all our rural roads, that would be complete streets for our rural network, just so bicyclists have a place to ride where they're not trying to ride the edge line. So, that's complete streets looks a lot different, based on where you're at in the state. And we do have some urban areas too that are county and that would look a lot like these pictures, but for the majority of our network, complete streets would be just get a 4-foot shoulder. So that's also kind of interesting, I suppose, to think about.
I'll confirm that statement, David. Big concern riding up in the hills up here is being hit by a trailer with big mirrors sticking out. Just a couple feet make a big difference.
Well, and the reason why, and not joking even, the reason why it's complete streets for rural is, it's also safety. Our number 2 cause of accidents is run off the road, with distracted driving. We've been trying to put in rumbles all over the place, but now we're doing skip rumbles so that bicyclists can, avoid the rumble strip. Like Caltrans is doing. So it's one of those things where we're trying to do a better job for all users, of the system. And so it's we're trying, so.
Caltrans had to move a rumble strip that was on the other side of the fog line onto the fog line because there's just no shoulder.
Well, I think I'm going to make a note to myself and see if I can take a look at the data again and see if we have enough to separate out into, urban versus rural and see if there's a difference. That might be a helpful exercise. I'll do that. Okay. Whoops, lost my cursor. Here we go. So in addition to complete streets, there's something that we call additional regulatory requirements. This is a very, has been a pretty small part of the survey. And what we ask them for is on top of, the roads and the bridges and all that, what other requirements do you have to comply with that costs money or that comes out of your, of the same pot of money? And the top three have always been, ADA compliance, mostly curb ramps and such, NPDES, which is a storm drain, and then traffic signs, and then complete streets came up this year as now becoming quite a significant category. And then there's other, which was a whole host of different things. And the responses on most of these are guesstimates, but you can see that the needs, this is 10-year needs, adds up to about 9.6 billion. And they also, the agencies who did respond also indicated what the funding was, about 6.7 billion, and the shortfall almost 3 billion. And I've never really publicized this data very much or included it in the big aggregate number, mostly because these responses have almost always been guesstimates. They don't have, many agencies do not actually have a good inventory or a good sense. It was a little bit of a gut check, a number that they thought they had. So I've been cautious about including this, but it has been consistently about 9 billion or so for the last several cycles. I think too that more and more agencies are beginning to get a better handle on this. And I want us to just to point out that there is a little bit, $10 billion in needs is not insignificant. And that shortfall of 3 billion, will it grow? I don't know. But we do think that it is something to continue monitoring. So the big part of the cost and dollars come from construction costs. And we spend quite a lot of time and focus on monitoring what these trends are. So if you look at a street that's in pretty good shape, here's the one with an average PC of 75. Typically, you do some sort of a seal. And right now the costs are about $6.60 a square yard. That's the average cost. And I wanted to share this chart. This is the trends going all the way back to 2008. And what each year represents is the range of cost for a seal. And then we just took the average. And we did the average simply because it was the simplest thing to do. And when you look at the huge range in data here, it's hard to look at we looked at the median, we looked at range, we looked at, should we do a 95th percentile, 80th percent? We did all of those. And we basically said the average is as good as anything. But the trend here now you can see is back in 2008, seals only cost about $3. Now that's $2008, of course, only $3. And then during the recession, the 2009, 2010 recession, seals actually went up. And part of that was because people couldn't afford to do a lot of overlays. And so they fell back to, well, if I can't do an overlay, let's do some seals. And we actually saw a growth in a number of seals that were placed. The other is that I think the industry or the cities and counties kind of caught up with the technologies, the new seals that were being that were available with new polymers and new additives that were more, I would say, more perform better. And so a lot of people caught on to it. And then it kind of flattened out over 2014, 2016. But since 2016, and when the economy started booming again, it has gone up consistently. And in 2020 now, the cost is about $6, which is double what it was in 2008. Now, the increase in cost, the 19% that you see there, is from 2018. And that was a pretty steep increase. Okay, we haven't seen an increase quite this much, but we're talking seals, $5, $6 a square yard. It doesn't seem like a lot. Well, let's take a look now at overlays. And this is a typical road, PCI 54. This is what we would typically overlay. And you can see that the trend is slightly different. Now, remember the scale here on the y-axis is also, now we're talking $25, $35, $40, not just $5 or $6. And back in 2008, the average was 20, and it actually dropped during the recession. And I think many of you might remember construction bids were coming in 10, 20% lower than the engineer's estimate. contractors were pretty hungry, and ARRA money was helpful in pushing out more money for construction paving. So it dropped in 2010, 2012, and then it started slowly climbing up again. And between 2016 to 2020, you see the same trend as the seals. The costs have increased. So from 2018 to 2020, it's gone up about 15%. And this is where the costs get, and then now you can start counting them, because now we're talking $22 to $25, okay? Then there's also reconstruction costs. This is a road with a PCI of 5. You can see it's pretty much trashed. It's broken up. All it takes is one bad winter and you probably have, the entire road popping out with potholes. So typical reconstruction costs have always been in the high 2 digits. Back in 2008, it was $80 and it dropped, and it was below that level for many, many years. 2 reasons. One is most agencies didn't do a lot of reconstruction. And when they did, they tried to make sure that it was a project that was big enough that got some pretty good bids. Obviously during the recession, again, I think contractors were pretty hungry. The second part, I think, that really made a difference was the use of recycling technologies, food at reclamation, for instance, which dropped prices down about 30 to 40% below conventional. So that was a huge change, a game changer, if you will, for needs. But you can also see, though, that from 2018 to 2020, it did go up as well, significantly, 23% in this one area. Maybe because people have more money and can begin to look at reconstructing their streets. But definitely all trends here show increases in construction costs. So you can kind of see where I'm going, right? If construction costs go up, well, our needs are going to go up. So let me pause for a second again and see if you have any questions. Okay.
Margot, it's Rachel.
Hi, Rachel.
Nice to see you. Just curious, have you compared this to what shop costs have gone up, or how those have changed?
No, we have not. I think anecdotally, everyone's saying that the costs have gone up. I know on the bridge section too, in the last 4 years, we've seen increases of above 20% as well. But I have not compared it with the shop.
I know that anecdotally, we're also having trouble where sometimes no one bids in part because of SB1, boosting a lot more money is going into the market, and contractors just aren't hungry right now. But,
yeah. And that's actually a good point. SB1, if you can think about it, it injected $5 billion almost overnight into the paving and construction industry. Yes, some of it paid for design and such, but a lot of it went into construction. And I might as well talk about that right now, is that the capacity of the contractors was not enough. They just didn't have the capacity to ramp up to an additional $5 billion, or even if it was $4 billion in construction costs. We think this is one of those unintended consequences, that just as SB1 was kicking in and the contractors were thinking about expanding or ramping up, we had the repeal in 2018. That froze a lot of expansion efforts. No contractor, I know that when SB1 passed in 2017, I did talk with contractors who from out of state who were thinking about coming into California and starting a California office or branch or practice. In 2018, that all stopped. Nobody was going to do anything until they knew whether it was going to stay. And so in November of 2018, we finally got, it was not repealed. And so at that point, I think people in the contracting industry got a little bit more comfortable and were ready to dive in. So 2019, and these unit prices are primarily from 2019, does not reflect that expansion in contracting capacity. We think that it's probably going to be a couple of years before that contracting capacity is sufficient to meet the funding that's available. So we're in this very uncomfortable period where you have a lot of money for construction. You're not getting a whole lot of bids, so your bids are high, and the unit prices are high. A lot of contractors can dictate what that is. The charts that I've shown, I think, reflect that. What will it be like in 2020, 21, and 22? I don't know. The pandemic certainly has shaken up a few things. Last year, a lot of construction projects got put on hold or deferred because agencies weren't sure about the funding. I think now there's some clarity on that. But nonetheless, I think what this study shows is one of those, we just hit it at the time when things were kind of unstable. And so we're basing our data on needs from an unstable period. That's all I can say right now.
Also, related to the rural urban split, I'm curious if some of these price trends, I mean, this is such a huge range of unit costs on all of these things. If there were any kind of trends on location, I know typically, you know, if folks have to mobilize in a more rural area, bids tend to come in higher, but I don't know if that's actually true or not. I'm curious if you'd seen anything on that.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and take a look at the data, Rachel. All the costs increase, rural or urban, they increase. Whether the rurals increase more or less in an urban, I can't say right now. My guess is that the variation in the data is so wide that we may not be able to see anything significant. But I just made a note to myself. I'm going to see if we can figure that one out.
Just for your awareness, I'm currently processing an FTIP amendment for a construction cost increase 11%. And the reason is material cost increase. I hope it's not a trend, but.
Well, it could be. I don't know.
And it is a Caltrans shop project.
Okay. Okay. Well, I had hoped that I think, you know, the new technologies with the recycling would have kind of mitigated the increase of cost in materials. There is a shortage of aggregates in the state by and large. I don't know if you know, a lot of aggregates in California actually imported from Canada. So recycling was a way of avoiding that importation of those materials and saves on cost. The more recycling we can do, the better, because, someone in LA County told me one time, the best quarry we have is already in our roads. So, okay. I think you can all kind of tell that I'm setting the stage for, not great news. Let's not forget unpaved roads. The number of unpaved roads actually grew by, I think, about 150 miles or so in this study. And the cost of maintaining those unpaved roads also went up. I remember, I think I talked with Madera County, and they told me that the dust mitigation and environmental concerns actually are a little bit more expensive than I would expect. So, the needs for the 10-year needs for unpaved roads is about 1.6 billion. And this is, by the way, included in the big number. So here's the big number. Total pavement needs for the next 10 years. It was 61.7 billion in 2018, and it's now 76 billion. So it went up about $13 billion. Huge. Let me kind of pause and let everyone digest this before I move on. All right. So we broke down the needs by county. You have seen these maps before. The dark brown counties are the ones where there's more than $2 billion worth of needs. Clearly, of course, the bigger counties, the more urban ones in many cases. The light yellow ones are less than $500 million in needs. Mostly the more rural counties, smaller communities. Nope, not a huge surprise here. But I usually like to show this map together with the next one. So just kind of keep an idea. You can see dark brown, or the mostly in Southern California, a little bit in the Bay Area, and that little swath of the Central Valley between the Bay Area and Southern California. When you look, though, at this picture, this is, if I have a needs of 500 million, how much is my funding meeting those needs? And what the red shows is that less than 20% of the needs in that particular county are met by its current funding levels. And the green says that more than 80% of the needs are met. So when you look at this map, there's only two counties, San Francisco and Orange County, have more than 80% of the needs met with current funding. They're in a really good spot. Yes, they have a lot of needs, but their funding is commensurate or almost commensurate with what the needs are. So now the picture is completely flipped. The counties that are hurting the most are, I don't think it's a big surprise, the rural counties. The needs are smaller, but the funding is a lot less. And in most cases, less than 20% of their needs are met. The Central Valley as well. But now if you look at the Bay Area or Southern California, you're in the yellow category. In other words, big needs, but 40 to 60% of it are met by current funding. So I think this picture actually paints a slightly different story. And I will say one thing is when we did the analysis back in 2016 and 2018, all those previous years, and we said, what if we got more money? What if we got another billion? What if we got another 2 billion? All those analyses always depended on if we got the extra money would go to the areas which needed it. But if you look at the allocation formula for SB1, that is not the case, right? It's allocated based on mileage, population, the same formulas that we've had before. So I've used this example. If you are a city in Orange County and your PCI, average PCI is 80s, and you're in the 80s because you've got enough money to fix all the roads, and so you're in pretty good shape, you are still going to get SB1 money, even though you may not need it. Versus if I go to Lake County, which has a average PCI of, I don't know, 40, in the 40s somewhere, a lot of roads, small population, they're not going to get more needs than what the allocation formula is. So there's this tiny disconnect. When we do our analysis, we're always making the assumption that the money is going to go to where it's needed. But what happens in reality, of course, is that the money goes based on a formula and it's not based on needs. So how much of that affects our projections? It's hard for me to tell without doing a county by county kind of analysis, which we really don't have the resources to do so. But I just wanted to put it out there that our projections always have an implicit assumption, money's going to go where it's needed. What really happens is not the case. So I want to pause for a second and see if anyone has any comments on that. Okay. Then let's move on to essential components. These are the everything else that's not paving. That's the signals, the storm drains, the striping, the sidewalks, the signs. They all add up, and individually they're small numbers, but when they add up, they're about 35%, 30% of the total needs. And safety, all of this is plunked into this category. And when you look at the essential component needs by county, the same trend. The Bay Area, a little bit of Central Valley, Southern California have the preponderance of the needs. It's about $35 billion, about half of the pavements. And the next one is bridges. And I know I'm running a little short on time, so I'm going to speed up a tiny bit. On the bridges, this is the analysis that both Quincy Engineering and Spy Pond did. It was included in the download, the links that you guys had. Very robust technical report, and I'm just going to summarize it in 3 or 4 slides. First, the local cities and counties own about half the bridges in California. Over 12,000, the other half is owned by Caltrans by and large. Here is a number of bridges. Most of you have probably in the 100 to 200 range. Los Angeles sticks out there. They have about 1,400, more than 1,400 bridges. This chart, I think, is very helpful. The one on the left is taking all the state 12,000, the local bridges, 12,000 of them, and breaking it up into good, fair, poor. So good news, about half the bridges are in the good condition, that's 48%. We have 40% in fair, and with 11.5% in poor. In contrast with the state bridges, 3/4 of them are in good condition, 21% in fair, and only a small sliver, about 3% in poor. So a very different contrast. But to be also fair, the state bridges carry a lot more traffic, and so has a little more catastrophic kind of consequences if those bridges were to fail. But just quick picture, the bridge picture is not great. When we look at the percent poor, how much of it is percent poor? Everything in red means that more than 14% of the bridges in that county are in poor condition. And this is a slightly different way of looking at it from roads. The ones in green are the counties where bridges less than 4% are in poor condition. And then the yellows are between 4 and 14%. Okay, so this was interesting. This is the first time that we've been able to share the information like this. But I think it tells you right away, which of the counties have a large percentage of poor bridges. And percent poor, by the way, is one of the metrics that we use for bridges. So the total bridge needs this year, in consultation with the Highway Bridge Committee, there was a lot of discussion on the methodology, but unit prices went up as well. And so it's now $7 billion, a little bit over $7 billion. It was $5.5 billion 2 years ago. On the right-hand side, in the pie chart, you can see where the preponderance of this needs are. It's in bridge replacements, 2.4 billion, bridge preservation, 1.2 billion, bridge widening, 2.6 billion. And then everything else, seismic retrofits, strengthening, they're in the millions rather than the billions. But there's a significant chunk of needs in the bridges. The other part too is some of the analysis of scenarios that we ran, that SpyPond did, is that I said before that we look at the percent poor as one of the performance metrics. The goal is to try and reduce percent poor or keep it stable. And you can see the green and blue lines down at the bottom. We would need a funding level of about $700 to $800 million a year to keep percent poor at 11.5%. Not improve it, just keep it at 11.5%. What is our current funding level? It's actually about $290 million a year, which is that green line. And if we were to look at things by 2040, you can see that by that green line, more than 50% of our bridges will be poor.
Hey, Margo?
Yes.
The colors don't seem to be matching up for me.
Okay.
The green line, oh,
yes.
Never mind. It does match up. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. All right, so let me jump onto the funding analysis next. This is for the pavements.
I know we're getting close to time, but it looks like we're transitioning from bridge, and I wanted to comment on the bridge. If that's
yeah, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. This is for the benefit of everybody. Jose Luis Casas is here, SACOG. I'm on the Highway Bridge Program Advisory Committee. I think I might be the only Bridge Advisory Committee member on the call today. Margo's right. This is the first time that our local bridges have really been analyzed in detail. A lot of work went into these two slides, and I wanted to bring a couple things to your attention. One is there is no plan for getting us to 700 million to 800 million per year. I don't know if that would be like a doubling, more than a doubling of what we currently have. And for that to happen, we would need to see reauthorization increase substantially or set aside a bunch of money for the bridge program. When the new reauthorization comes up, it might not have a set aside for the bridge program, in which case we need to really seriously look at how much we're spending on bridges. Last time for the FAST Act, if we spent any more money on bridges, it would have come at the expense of our RSTP funding. And we really need to think this next time around, would we want to have our RSTP funding take a hit in order to cover these bridges? The second thing I want to point out is there's a draft proposal. I don't know if it's circulated out statewide yet, but we are recommending that local assistance change the local match for off-system and on-system. Or another way of thinking it is we're going to change the local match for the rurals and for the urbans. Right now, if you have a rural off-system bridge, you don't pay a match. We did that back in like 2006 under Denix because rural bridges weren't getting done. and we realized that there was a match issue. And urban on-system bridges are paying a match, but it's 11.47, the smallest minimum federal match. We're proposing to double that for on-system bridges, back going to 20%. And then for off-system bridges, asking them to, once again, pony up a local match of 11.47, which there's no way to count. There's no percentage when you go 0 to 11.47. It's not a doubling, it's a giant increase for rurals. So if you look at this kind of chart and you think of, okay, there's going to be a lot more costs needed for bridges, what the Bridge Advisory Committee is saying, and locals need to be helping to pay for that. So cities, your cities and counties, your region, you're going to start getting requests probably for funding applications for the local match on bridges. Your locals are going to start having a harder time paying the local match on bridges. And that's because the Bridge Advisory Committee, the bridge program is having a hard time paying for bridges. So I just want to pull those two things out as the advisory committee member on the bridge.
It's Dave Lehman again, Stanislaus County. You know, one of the things we really got to talk about with the bridge program is how much we spend on PA&ED. We replaced this winter a local bridge for $350,000. Sequoia CE over a canal, irrigation canal, and we spent up to $1 million on with Caltrans on studies and everything else on basically an identical bridge over a man-made irrigation canal. And so we could have replaced 3 bridges for the cost of PA&ED because there's a CEQA and NEPA CE. And Caltrans just loves spending money on PA&ED. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Hey,
So
David, do you have my email?
if yes, I must, because I'm on this meeting. So I can send you examples, Jose. We're going to start doing a local bridge once a year.
I have an
with SB1
off-the-shelf
money.
solution just for what you just brought up that was modeled and done in Sutter County.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so we have a solution. A problem with it is we haven't marketed this solution. So people aren't aware of it or know about it. And it's tailor-made for the bridge over a canal situation.
yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. We did a contact precast bridge for $350,000 when Caltrans spent $1 million on almost an identical canal bridge on PA&ED. You know, it's the highway bridge program. We're spending money that we shouldn't on environmental studies that are worthless. So, you know, it
Sounds
just,
like a future meeting for more discussion.
Yep.
yeah.
Hit
And
me
I
up.
got to run. I've got a 9 o'clock I have to be at, but it just, or 10 o'clock. Any rate, thank you all for coming, and I got to bail. So,
Thanks, David.
All right. So we have a couple more minutes, and well, I'm going to kind of wrap up as quickly as I can, and hopefully just bleed into 5 minutes of your time. So let's talk about the funding. Quickly, SB1 is adding money. Now this is just the pavement section. It's adding about 500 million, a little bit over 500 million a year, about 22%. So it's making a difference, but it's not $1.5 billion that is in the bill. So we ran some scenarios, okay? So of the 500 million that's coming in, well, it's going to slow things down. This is a chart that shows the line shows the PCI, and then the bars show the unfunded backlog. And you want the PCI to stay stable or improve, and the unfunded backlog to go down, and it's not. So we're saying now in this report that with the inclusion of SB1, not all of SB1, because what the cities and counties are telling us is that about $530 million additional a year is going into paving. And with that, we don't arrest the decline, we slow down the decline. So if I look at the 2018 study, all these PCIs will be about 4 points below. So it's better, but the unfunded backlog is still growing, okay? So that's the first part. Then what will it cost to maintain things the way it was? It's going to be 3.8 billion a year. And in 2018, what it would cost was about 3 billion. So those additional increases in construction costs really have a big impact, about $800 million more or less to kind of stay where we are. And then the question we always ask is, if we wanted to improve everything in the state to best management practices within the first 10 years, it would require about 7.8 billion. And before it was about 6.8. So an extra billion in the first 10 years. And then after that, it would you could keep it stable around 3 billion, which is, by the way, what the existing dollars are. It's around about $3 billion. So the sale back in 2016 was that give us some money to stay at this scenario. That was what SB1 was intended to do, was to keep things stable. Unfortunately, we're not seeing that. What we're seeing is actually the slide right now. So we added up everything for the needs for these three categories, the pavement, essential components, and bridges. You can see what the 2018 needs were, was 101 billion. Today in 2020, it's 118. The funding did go up, by the way, both in the pavement and essential components. They add up to slightly under $1 billion. The bridges didn't change. So the shortfall, unfortunately, has increased. So just some concluding thoughts. I think when we talk about what the impacts of SB1 was, it's a little mixed. The picture is pretty mixed. It did increase PCI by 1 point, as I mentioned. That's the good news. But we think it could be a little bit higher. We think it's an underestimate. We also think that the last 2 years was not the best way to, well, there were anomalies, if you will. 2018 was definitely one where not everyone spent the money. People were worried that they might not have it. Some agencies just put it on hold until 2019. And even in 2019, it wasn't quite catching up. So we don't think we have enough data to really truly appreciate the impacts of SB1. By and large, the future funding, this is the part that concerns me the most, and I'm looking for feedback from all of you, is that when we looked at what cities and counties are telling us they have for the next 10 years, they've added an additional 500 for pavements, an additional 390 for essential components, nothing on the bridges because that's kind of fixed. So if we're thinking that we have 1.5 billion for the local road system, there's a 600 million that I don't know where it's going. I don't know if it's being used to buy equipment, to prolong more projects. I don't know if it's used for, I know there are agencies that said they had to deal with FEMA, they had to deal with storms in the winter, slides, emergency kind of situations, and maybe that's a new category we need to account for. But 600 million, it's a big chunk of change, and we need to figure out where that went. And I don't know where that went. And then lastly, I think I've already mentioned before, construction costs have gone up sharply. So the next question here is, will things stabilize? Will the market correct itself? Will contractors expand capacity so that by 21, 22, prices fall back down and we get to a stable situation? Potentially, but again, that's kind of an unknown. So that's sort of where we are with this report. And that's, I think, my last slide. So any questions that you guys have, I'm happy to stick around for another half hour or so if you guys have the time.
Anybody?
Well, hey, I noticed Elizabeth mentioned in the chat. I'll just say one of the things I do with every one of these local needs assessment reports is I go to the PCIs by city and county, and I copy and paste them into documents that I'm using. And it would be really neat if we could publish like a separate appendix in Excel so that I don't have to manipulate the PDF.
Yeah, you mean for the PCIs for the individual counties? Yeah.
Just add a separate link on the website. There might be other tables that people use. Maybe there's some other things you can just plop the Excel thing on there, but that would be really helpful.
I see. Okay. Sure, I can talk with SEAC about that. They maintain the website, but we can probably find a place to upload that material.
And take a look at Elizabeth's comment. I think she might be asking about something.
Yeah, there's some comments in the chat.
Oh, okay. Let's see. I'm not seeing the chat, but
is it possible to get the numbers by jurisdiction, by city? Or,
What numbers? You mean the PCI numbers?
yeah.
Yes. We have what we call numbers that they provide, and then the ones that don't provide with extrapolated numbers. We can give you the numbers that they provided.
No, that'd be terrific.
Margot, if you can email that to me or Gabriel, and then we'll get it out.
Okay, sure.
Anybody else?
And Margo, I had a specific question related to Kern that's on the chat, but we had 100% of our cities provide survey forms. I don't have their survey forms, but in the map that you have of for Kern in the back, it's about a third of our cities. The PCI was estimated. Ever like, maybe the PCI kind of what they reported doesn't make sense. So do you guys ever change those numbers for a city?
If they report the number to us, we use that number, so we don't change it. But if a city doesn't report any number for, let's say 2020, but reported a number back in 2012, what we do is we look at the trends for the other neighboring, for all the other cities within the county. And if we see that overall there was a decrease of 1 point in that time frame, then we'll assume that the city also has the same trend and will decrease it a point. So we do look at what that trend is within the county.
So you'll take the county trend. I was curious if we could just double check to make sure that those counties, those third of our cities that did report that they had, I'm almost sure that every one of them reported a PCI number. I can't imagine a third of them did not report a PCI number, because that's what they were focused on. And at least that's what the map shows at the back, in the individual county maps. Shows that about 4 cities of the 12 jurisdictions in Kern were estimated. So I think this is
Kern, right?
Yeah, Kern County.
Okay. Yeah, I do remember. I think there were 4 small cities that reported some information, but not all the data. I know they did not include any information on the essential components, the replacement costs. So we use our regression model to estimate what those were. I'll have to double check the PCIs if that was the case.
Yeah, the PCI was the issue.
Okay.
Thanks. And what might also clear it up is if we could just get that spreadsheet that has what you have in your database by municipality.
Okay. Okay.
I have a question more for the oversight committee for this. So SEAC, League, RTPA, all our reps that are on it from the different groups. And just curious what kind of lobbying, advocacy efforts anyone is planning related to the infrastructure, federal infrastructure or reauthorization bills, as well as COVID, how local jurisdictions are using their COVID relief funds that they got recently that are, for general fund purposes, or anything that's happening on that side to help boost the argument for public works departments to put more money into, our board of supervisors and city councils to put more money into their road system as well. I know everyone has a lot of different needs right now, but that's what we end up advocating for, and what the game plan is there. And I see Chris turned on his camera, so he probably has a game plan.
Yeah, a little bit of a game plan. Obviously, this has been a really difficult cycle of the report for several reasons. So I think we're a little bit, it's a little less gelled than it's probably been in the past, but I think, my thoughts on it, Jose Luis was talking about reauthorization. CSAC is supporting HR 1299, which would restore the bridge program as a dedicated funding program, and we're pushing counties to ask their representatives to co-author that. I think at the federal level, what we're hearing from the House of Representatives is that they're going to kind of stick with I think it was HR1, whatever their reauthorization bill kind of got cast as a Green New Deal bill. But we are getting some interest in that program. And then on the Senate side, Senator Padilla submitted restoration of the Highway Bridge program as a core program as one of his priorities at CSAC's request. So I think there's definitely, given the enhanced bridge analysis, that will be really helpful for us, the story maps, the information that we have from the report, in pushing that priority at the federal level. And then it's sort of what is the federal play? Is it the American Jobs Plan? Is it full-on reauthorization, right? And then, as Jose Luis mentioned, pending the outcome of that, we have to have the hard discussion at the state level of what do we do there, right? And so I think, from my perspective, that's probably the federal level is probably the biggest immediate push because of everything that's currently going on. There was a question in the chat about presenting to the CTC. Yeah, Gabriel already answered that. So we'll be pushing that out. And then there's also discussions at the state level about what to do with the huge budget surplus. So we're convening with Transportation California, League of Cities. CSAC is going to be doing a budget priorities letter that's much broader than infrastructure, but we'll be rolling some of the information here, especially as related to the bridge program, into those efforts. So, I think we're in a tough spot at the state level because I don't think we're going to go back to that well anytime soon. So I think a lot of the action is at the federal level. And then for the state, really just saying, we've seen some improvements. We're seeing these cost increases. We're seeing a lot of money go into the essential components and things like that, which I think at this juncture is actually a helpful message for us to show. We've also got great data from SB1 about I think of the 7,000 or so local projects that have been delivered or are currently planned for this fiscal year. I think we have about 1,500 projects that have complete streets components specifically called out in the description. So, we're seeing stuff that would have gone into maybe grant programs and been smaller, less competitive projects get funded here. And so I think while we would want to see more movement on pavement, I think while we've got to figure out, we're seeing the delivery really ramp up over the 3 fiscal years expenditure reports. That what does the future expected spending really look like? Because I think, as Margot was mentioning, this was just an awkward time to survey folks because we were seeing 50% year-over-year reductions in the formula revenues everyone's getting. So it's sort of for the state, it's like a stay the course, let's not divert the funding sort of message. But I think the opportunity to really advance is going to be at the federal level. So we'll be doing, we've got to kind of coordinate, but we'll be doing our typical rollout with state level stakeholders, and we can talk about how we roll this into federal advocacy. The final question you asked, Rachel, about the general purpose revenue going to local jurisdictions. I know we're waiting for guidance from the Department of Treasury. They had 60 days, I believe. So we're looking for that. There's kind of a limited definition of infrastructure that they used in that. So I think some additional clarity there is going to be helpful. We're talking to our federal lobbyist about that. It specifically calls out broadband and other things, but I think we need to we'll get some certainty from Treasury as to whether they're viewing that as kind of an exclusive list or not. So
well, just as a final follow-up task, I would invite you. I know some of us are really small agencies, so we serve as our legislative staff person, as well as our RTP person, as well as our RTPA general thing. but to just reach out, either Rebecca Long at MTC has a pretty good list, and so does Bill Higgins at CalCog, of those of us that work on legislation as well, and maybe pulling us together as a follow-up task on strategizing, and or if there's a call for reaching out to our congressional members and such that needs to happen to make sure that gets filtered down to us, that'd be great.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We'll definitely can do that.
Anybody else? Margot, thank you so much for your time and effort. Excellent, excellent presentation. Thank you so much. And Gabriel, thanks for serving. Appreciate you volunteering on the committee. And with that, that's a wrap. I did put in the chat, it is being recorded. I will have it converted to a YouTube link. If anybody wants it, shoot me an email. And Chris, for future reference, if you have a message that you would like communicated to the statewide RTPA groups, shoot it my way and I'll blast it out for whatever advocacy efforts we can help. All right, that's a wrap. Thank you.
Thank you,
All right,
Margot.
thanks everyone. Good to see some faces.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.